Hello! Today, we'll be showing you how to replace the palm rest assembly on an Acer C720P Chromebook. First, you will need a few tools. An anti-static mat is recommended to avoid electrostatic discharge, which can damage electronic parts. A small, magnetic tip Phillips head screwdriver will be necessary for this replacement. A spudger will be necessary for this replacement. You can use either plastic or metal, whichever you prefer. You will need thermal paste during this replacement. Tweezers may also come in handy during this replacement, as they might be helpful when handling small parts. The first step will be to remove the 13 bottom cover screws. Next, you will use your spudger to carefully pry and remove the bottom cover. Now, you will remove the two battery screws. Next, you will disconnect the battery cable from the motherboard and remove the battery. Now, you will remove the SSD card screw and remove the SSD card from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the two Wi-Fi antenna cables from the Wi-Fi card. Now, you will loosen the 4 heatsink screws. Now, you will loosen the 2 fan screws. Now, you will disconnect the fan cable from the motherboard and then remove the fan and heatsink from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect and remove the 2 capacitors from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the speaker cable from the motherboard. Now, you will disconnect the touchpad cable from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the keyboard cable from the motherboard. Now, you will disconnect the motherboard to daughterboard cable from the motherboard. Next, you will disconnect the LCD cable from the motherboard. Now, you will remove the two motherboard screws and then remove the motherboard. Next, you will remove the two hinge screws from each of the two hinges. Now, you will push the hinges forward and remove the palm rest assembly from the top assembly. Next, you will remove the two daughterboard screws. Now, you will remove the LED board cable from the daughterboard and then remove the daughterboard. You will now remove the speakers. Now, you will remove the two LED board screws and then remove the LED board. The first step in the installation of your replacement palm rest assembly will be to set the LED board into place and replace the two LED board screws. Now, you will snap the speakers into place on the palm rest assembly. Next, you will reconnect the LED board cable to the daughterboard. Now, you will set the daughterboard into place and replace the two daughterboard screws. Next, you will line up the hinges on the top assembly and replace the two hinge screws in each of the two hinges. Now, you will set the motherboard into place and replace the two motherboard screws. Next, you will apply thermal paste to the CPU on the motherboard. Now, you will set the heatsink and fan into place on the motherboard. Now, you will tighten the 4 heatsink screws. Next, you will tighten down the 2 fan screws. Now, you will reconnect the fan cable to the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the 2 Wi-Fi antenna cables to the Wi-Fi card. Now, you will reconnect the LCD cable to the motherboard. Now, you will reconnect the motherboard to daughterboard cable to the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the keyboard cable to the motherboard. Now, you will reconnect the touchpad cable to the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the speaker cable to the motherboard. Next, you will reconnect the 2 capacitors to the motherboard. Now, you will reconnect the SSD card to the motherboard and replace the SSD card screw. Next, you will set the battery into place and replace the 2 battery screws. Now, you will reconnect the battery cable to the motherboard. Next, you will snap the bottom cover back into place. The final step will be to replace the 13 bottom cover screws. You have now successfully replaced the palm rest assembly on your Acer Chromebook. Nice job!